Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel, and on today's video I'll be predicting on what every MLB team should do this offseason. Watch until end to find out. Let's get this video started. The Baltimore Orioles are still in rebuilding mode after having a 52-win season in 2021. They have a huge budget and all the cap space in the world to work with. I wouldn't expect them to sign anyone big this offseason, but they probably will sign some veteran players to fill in those holes this offseason. Their biggest offseason need is pitching big time. Last season, they had the worst ERA in the league at 5.84, and that was the worst mark in the majors by a wide margin. They should look at some veterans to add to their pitching depth, and they could possibly trade those veteran pitchers in the trade deadline next season. The Boston Red Sox made the playoffs last season and almost made it to the World Series. Their biggest offseason need is starting pitching for sure this offseason, as can be seen in the playoffs besides some solid performances. Their starting rotation in the playoffs felt thin and looked pretty shaky for the most part, and their offense carried the majority of the time. In the regular season, their starting rotation had a 4.49 ERA last season. So bringing in another frontline arm would make sense as Boston tries to catch Tampa Bay in the AL East. However, the Red Sox don't have much cap space left to sign a bunch of starting pitchers, so they're going to have to be efficient with their money this offseason. The biggest offseason need for the New York Yankees is shortstop. Even the general manager of the New York Yankees isn't hiding his desire to add a premier shortstop this offseason, recently saying the position is an area of need that must be addressed. The good thing for them is that the market is stacked with top shortstops, so if they're willing to spend, they should be able to land one. There's been a lot of buzz from fans about Carlos Correa, but the Yankees could really use a lefty bat. But unfortunately, Corey Seager signed with the Texas Rangers this offseason and his deal was 10 years. What the Yankees need to do this offseason is to sign him, which is a big time name and that will definitely put them over the luxury tax this upcoming year. But I think they will be okay with that. They also need to sign some depth pieces this offseason, because that's where they struggle when their players start to get injured and things go south very quickly. The Tampa Bay Rays' biggest offseason need is starting pitching. They have plenty of young pitching, but Tampa Bay staff would benefit from the addition of a veteran starter to help their young starting rotation core develop. So they did sign veteran starting pitcher Corey Kluber this offseason. Their bullpen was elite last season with a 3.24 ERA and their offense was pretty good too. Last season in the playoffs, the Rays watched those youngsters struggle in the postseason, and with Tyler Glasnow set to miss the 2022 season following Tommy John surgery, bringing in Corey Kluber was a great idea. They picked up Mike Zunino's option, so he's coming back next season. On November 27th of 2021, the Rays finalized a deal with shortstop Wander Franco. The contract is an 11-year deal worth $182 million. So Tampa Bay is in pretty good shape for the upcoming season. The Blue Jays' biggest offseason need is pitching. The Toronto Blue Jays struck gold with Robbie Ray's 1 year, $8 million last winter, getting a Cy Young Award caliber season out of the lefty. Unfortunately for them, he signed with the Seattle Mariners this offseason, and they also lost Marcus Semien, and he signed with the Texas Rangers. The good news is that they signed Kevin Gausman to a 5-year deal worth $110 million. He'll be the new ace of the Blue Jays starting rotation, and that will complete the rotation. But they should still sign some veteran starting pitchers for depth. They could also use some bullpen help this offseason too. So they will be very good this upcoming season and will be a potential World Series contender. For the AL Central, we'll start out with the Chicago White Sox. The White Sox picked up Craig Kimbrell's option and declined Cesar Fernandez's option this offseason. So they're going to need to fill in a spot at second base. So their biggest offseason need is second base. There are plenty of good second basemen available this offseason. So now I start calling the Cleveland team the Guardians. The biggest offseason need is outfielder. Miles Straw will return as Cleveland's center fielder, but the team especially needs corner outfield help in a big way. Cleveland's 701 outfield OPS and 50 home runs each rank 27th in the majors, while one of the current outfielders might get another shot. Adding at least one impact outfield bat seems like a no-brainer if they can find the right deal. Honestly, I don't really know. It seems like they might be selling, and it seems like they're not going to buy this offseason, and that could mean a rebuild is coming. The Detroit Tigers had a lot better season last year than I predicted. Their biggest offseason need is starting pitching. In the offseason, they signed Javier Baez to a 6-year deal worth $140 million. I think that the Tigers could get some big-name players this offseason, and maybe they could sign a really good veteran starting pitcher. They do have a lot of money this offseason to throw around if they're willing to spend it. They could also use some bullpen help this offseason, and if they can get some good starting pitching this offseason, they could possibly be an AL Central contender next season, if everything goes right. The Kansas City Royals' biggest offseason need is starting pitching. They do have some quality young arms establishing themselves in the majors, but the addition of a veteran starter would go a long way towards helping those guys take the next step. Their starting rotation had a 4.97 ERA last season. I also think that they need a big-time outfielder and another impact bat. The Minnesota Twins' biggest offseason need is starting pitching. In the offseason, they re-signed Byron Buxton to a 7-year deal worth $100 million. This is a great move by the Twins. Byron is a guy you want to build your team around. Michael Pineda is a free agent, though a return to Minnesota seems like a possibility. Last year's trades of Jose Barrios and AJ Happ left holes in the rotation that must be filled via free agency or trade. The Twins will likely try adding 2 or 3 relievers this offseason. If they want to be a playoff contender next season, they need to fill in those holes in the rotation. The Houston Astros picked up Yuli Gurriel's option this offseason, which is a great deal for $8 million, bringing back the AL batting champ. Their biggest offseason needs are starting pitching, center fielder, catcher, and shortstop when Carlos leaves. Justin Verlander is back on a 2-year deal, and Zach Greinke is a free agent this offseason. The loss of Garrett Cole 2 winters ago, and now without Zach potentially not coming back, Houston's rotation has gone through quite an upheaval. Lance McCullers Jr. is a solid starter, and some of the young arms showed promise in 2021. But for a team with title contention, they need another quality starting pitcher to fill in that hole in the rotation. The most urgent ones to address after starting pitching are shortstop and catcher this offseason. The Los Angeles Angels' biggest offseason need is starting pitching. Usually we already know the answer to this every year for the Angels. This offseason is different. Why? Because the Angels actually signed a free agent starting pitcher this offseason. The Angels signed Noah Syndergaard to a 1-year deal. That's a great upgrade to a rotation that ranked 22nd in the league with a 4.78 ERA last season. The Angels are going to have 1 more year with Justin Upton on the books until it frees up $28 million. I think that the Angels will be making some big splashes this offseason. The Oakland Athletics have a pretty good core to build around, and I think they need some outfield help. They do have Gold Glovers on both sides in the infield, and those are the same great players to build around. The biggest offseason need is the bullpen. Oakland ranked 10th in the AL with a 4.21 bullpen ERA last season, while their starting rotation had a 3.91 ERA. They do have some work to do in order to rebuild the bullpen after having several players going on the free agent market. So let's see if they can bring in some bullpen and outfield help in the offseason. The Seattle Mariners, I think, are in for a huge offseason, signing some big names. They needed pitching, but they did sign reigning American League Cy Young Award winner Robbie Ray to a 5-year deal worth $115 million. Their biggest offseason need is an infield power bat. I think they're going to sign an impact bat or 2 this offseason, trying to replace Kyle Ziegler at third base. Seattle could try signing one of the free agent shortstops and moving him to third base to play next to 2020 Gold Glove Award winner shortstop J.P. Crawford. Perhaps Seattle just goes after a third baseman instead, as the Mariners will need to replace Kyle Ziegler at the hot corner. They should try and sign a shortstop and move him to second base. The Texas Rangers' biggest offseason need is starting pitching. Texas' starting rotation had a 5.33 ERA and ranked 28th in the league in the 2021 season. In the offseason, the Rangers signed shortstop Corey Seager to a 10-year deal worth $325 million. They also signed second baseman Marcus Semien to a 7-year deal worth $175 million, and they also signed starting pitcher John Gray to a 4-year deal worth $56 million. The Texas Rangers are now heading on the right direction in their current rebuild. First thing the Braves need to do is to re-sign Freddie Freeman, plain and simple. The Atlanta Braves' biggest offseason need is the outfield. In the offseason, they signed Kirby Yates to help reinforce their bullpen, and they signed him to a 2-year deal. Also in the offseason, they exercised a 2024 option for their head coach. One bad thing that happened this offseason was Marcell Ozuna was suspended for 20 games for violating domestic violence policy. The Braves won't get back Ronald Acuna Jr. back from his torn ACL until April or May, so they will need to fill in those holes. I also think they should get some depth pieces for the rotation this offseason. Miami Marlins' biggest offseason need was catcher, but in the offseason they made this a priority by trading for a catcher from the Pittsburgh Pirates. I think that the Marlins are buyers this offseason even though they traded away Starling Marte last season. I also think they need a veteran outfielder and a veteran starter this offseason if they want to be a contender next season. By having some veterans around the clubhouse to improve their young core to take some pressure off of their young players and let them blossom into all-stars in the future. The New York Mets' biggest offseason need is outfield. In the offseason, they signed Max Scherzer to a 3-year deal worth $130 million. He will have an average salary of $43.33 million, and that sets a record. Surpassing the $36 million New York Yankees pitcher Garrett Cole is averaging after signing a 9-year deal. $324 million contract in 2019. Max Scherzer, age 37, becomes the oldest player in MLB history to sign a $100 million contract. I think that they need to add a jolt to their lineup, and the outfield is the obvious spot to make that happen. For the Philadelphia Phillies, their biggest offseason needs are a center fielder and also bullpen help. They rank 25th in the majors with a 4.60 bullpen ERA, setting a major league record for blown saves in a season. With the departure of some key bullpen relievers this offseason, they will need to rebuild the relief corps, which will be a priority for their general manager this offseason. Also, their center fielder position was near the bottom of the league last season, and they could use an upgrade at that position. If they rebuild their bullpen this offseason and find a center fielder, they could be a playoff caliber team next year. The Washington Nationals' biggest offseason need is starting pitching. They ranked 24th in the league with a 4.80 ERA last season. What the Nationals need to do is to start building around Juan Soto, as they trade almost everyone away. I don't think they will be buying huge this offseason at all. Just some veteran players to fill in some spots for the upcoming season next year. Now it's the beginning of a rebuilding team. The Chicago Cubs' biggest offseason need is starting pitching. Their starting rotation last season ranked 27th in the league with a 5.27 ERA. Kyle Hendricks remains at the top of the rotation this offseason, but they should seek a frontline starter to stabilize the rotation. The Cubs have a lot of money to spend on players this offseason. They got Wade Miley off waivers in the offseason, which I think is a great addition to the team, but they still need some starting pitching help. The Cubs did sign Yan Gomes to a 2-year deal, and they also signed Clint Frazier this offseason. So far, this is a great start to their offseason. The Cincinnati Reds' biggest offseason need is relief pitching. Their bullpen ranked 27th in the majors with a 4.99 ERA in the 2021 season. And given that 4 different pitchers collected 7 to 8 saves apiece, Cincinnati would benefit greatly from the addition of a reliable veteran arm for the 9th inning. The Reds do have some money to spend this offseason. They are going to need to find someone to replace Nick Castellanos. It's just going to come down to whether or not they're willing to spend that. The Milwaukee Brewers' biggest offseason need is the bullpen. I think they could have a huge offseason this year. They could go after a huge impact bat on the free agent market and try to make some upgrades at the outfield positions. This is the last year with Lorenzo Cain on the books for $16 million, and they should also add some depth pieces to the bullpen because if Josh Hader and Kevin Williams goes down, they will be in big trouble. Their starting rotation is locked down. The Pittsburgh Pirates' biggest offseason need is corner outfield. The Pirates' right fielders combined for a .655 OPS in the 2021 season. That was the second worst mark in the league ahead of only the Royals. The Pirates are still in rebuilding mode, but they should try to rebuild around one of their young stars. They should add an impact bat in right field, and that would make sense for them. The St. Louis Cardinals' biggest offseason need is shortstop. I think they are in a great position this offseason to make some huge moves. St. Louis let go of Carlos Martinez and Matt Carpenter, and with both of them coming off the books, they will save $35 million. They have already signed Steven Matz to a 4-year deal worth $44 million. They should target a star shortstop this offseason. Someone like Trevor Story would be huge for them. The Cardinals should add some impact pitching as well. maybe a frontline start possibly, or at least a good solid pitcher that will eat some innings for them. The Arizona Diamondbacks' biggest offseason need is the bullpen. Their bullpen ranked 28th in the majors with a 5.08 ERA. One of many reasons the club lost 110 games in 2021. In the offseason so far, they signed Mark Melancon to a 2-year deal worth $14 million. The only big contract is Madison Bumgarner, so they have plenty of money to make some moves. I don't think it's that realistic for them to make any huge signings this offseason. Maybe they are in the market, but I think they should get some veterans to fill in some spots again for the upcoming season. The Rockies' biggest offseason need is pitching and an impact outfield bat. After trading Nolan Arenado prior to the season and facing the loss of free agent Trevor Story, the Rockies will look to add an impact bat to the lineup. The Rockies' outfield had fewer home runs than any other team than Arizona. While its .719 OPS ranked 13th out of 15 teams in the National League, it's always a tough place to get pitchers to go to, but I think they will need some bullpen help. They could be in the market for some huge hitters this offseason, and they should sign some sort of valuable shortstop that doesn't have to be on the top of the free agent market. The Rockies will be able to hit pretty good this upcoming season, and it's just a matter of are they going to be able to prevent other teams from scoring. The Los Angeles Dodgers' biggest offseason need is starting pitching. With Matt Scherzer signing with the New York Mets this offseason and with Clayton Kershaw being free agent, so now bringing him back figures to be in the Dodgers' plans. If he signs somewhere else, Los Angeles will need to fill in those rotation spots. The Dodgers re-signed Chris Taylor this offseason to a multiple-year deal, but unfortunately they lost their shortstop Corey Seager in free agency to the Texas Rangers. Trevor Bauer is not opting out of his contract, obviously because he's getting paid $64 million over the next 2 years, I think. So no one is going to turn that down. The Dodgers could look a little bit different for this upcoming season, depending on what they do this offseason. The San Diego Padres' biggest offseason need is relief pitching. In the offseason, the Padres lost Mark Melancon, and that leaves the club to find a new closer. Their general manager has never been shy to target the best available players. So, San Diego could be in the midst for a top-tier closer on the market. They could add one more piece to the rotation, but they don't have much cap space. San Diego does need to add some bullpen depth this offseason. I don't expect that their pitching staff will be that bad, like they were last season, and I think that their pitching staff will be a lot better this upcoming season. The San Francisco Giants' biggest offseason need is starting pitching. This offseason for the Giants, Buster Posey retired on November 4th of 2021, and that saves $22 million. The Giants' starting rotation ranked third in the league with a 3.44 ERA last season. They were able to bring back 2 of the 4 starting rotation pitchers that were free agents. Kevin Gausman signed with Toronto, and Johnny Cueto is a free agent. They did sign a starting pitcher this offseason. His name is Alex Cobb, and he signed a 2-year deal. The Giants have a lot of money to make some moves this offseason, and I expect them to do so. So those are my biggest offseason needs for every MLB team. What moves do you want your team to make this offseason? Join me in the comment section down below and tell me what you guys think. If you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button, make sure to hit that like button, make sure to hit that notification bell to be notified of all new videos in the future. Please share this video with friends and family. My name is Nathan, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to just keep loving sports, and I'll see you next time.